Michelangelo and Revenge with a Brush. How the artist mocked a critic through the ages. Michelangelo Buonarroti, the creator of immortal masterpieces, had not only a divine talent, but also a caustic temper. Offended by unfair criticism, he responded not with words, but with art, so that his hidden messages have survived the centuries. In the midst of work on the frescoes of the chapel, Cardinal Biagio da Cesena, a well-known prude, outraged, "Is it appropriate naked bodies in the house of God?" Michelangelo, begrudgingly, kept silent, but soon on the fresco The Last Judgment appeared a creepy figure, a man with donkey ears, wrapped in a snake, with the face of the cardinal himself. Upon seeing the caricature, Biagio was furious and demanded that the Pope destroy the blasphemous image. But the pontiff laughed. "If you were sent to purgatory, I would still intervene, but hell is beyond my power." So Michelangelo did not just take revenge, he wrote a mockery into the history of art. And now millions of viewers see how arrogance was shamed by a genius. After the cardinal's death, someone suggested fixing the fresco, but Michelangelo replied, "Let posterity know how foolish it is to argue with art." Einstein's last mystery, the words that history took away. On the 18th of April, 1955, the world lost one of humanity's greatest minds. Albert Einstein passed away at the age of 76 when his abdominal aorta failed. But even in his final moments, the brilliant physicist remained true to himself. He deliberately refused surgery, accepting the inevitability of the end. His final words became the unsolved mystery of the 20th century. Spoken in his native German, they were never understood by the nurse next to him. Was it perhaps a final formula? Or a philosophical revelation? Or perhaps simple human words of farewell? This riddle perfectly symbolizes the entire life of Einstein, a genius who always remained a bit of a mystery even to those closest to him. His last words have vanished into time, like so many of the mysteries of the universe that he strove to understand. The 100 Years' War, the longest conflict of the Middle Ages. Contrary to its name, this surprisingly long military conflict between England and France lasted for 116 years, 1,337 and was a real test for both states. The confrontation was based not only on the dynastic claims of the English monarchs to the French throne, but also on a deep economic background. The struggle for control over rich Flanders and other strategically important regions. Joan of Arc, a simple peasant girl, played a special role in this protracted conflict, inspiring the demoralized French army to take decisive action. Her brilliant victories at Orléans and Reims, 1429, were the turning point of the war, allowing Charles VII to be crowned and French statehood to be restored. Although the tragic death of the Maid of Orléans, 1431, at the stake in Rouen was a grim episode of the war, her image has become an enduring symbol of patriotism and sacrifice. The 100 Years' War radically changed the face of Europe. It contributed to the formation of nation-states, the development of new battle tactics, mass use of archers, and laid the foundations for future Anglo-French rivalry. Interestingly, despite its formal end in 1453, individual skirmishes between the two countries continued for several more decades. Anne Boleyn, victim of Tudor black PR. The story of Anne Boleyn's 6 fingers and witch-like features is nothing more than 16th century propaganda. After Henry VIII broke with Rome to marry Anne, 1534, the Anglican Church he had created began a mass closure of monasteries. Confiscated wealth filled the treasury, and thousands of monks found themselves on the streets, the perfect breeding ground for the devil queen image. The 6th finger is really just a small defect in the nail plate, The protruding caddy is an artistic exaggeration by portrait painters. Accusations of witchcraft are a standard technique for discrediting women in power. Interesting fact: similar techniques were later used by French revolutionaries against Marie Antoinette, proving that the technology of harassment of royalty has been worked out for centuries. Cleopatra, a contemporary of Caesar but not of the pyramid builders. Although the image of Cleopatra VII is inextricably linked in the mass consciousness with ancient Egypt, chronologically, she was closer to the era of spaceflight than to the time of erection of the Great Pyramids. The last queen of Hellenistic Egypt ruled in century BC, while the Pyramid of Cheops was built about 2560 BC. The time interval between these events is more than 2,500 years. To illustrate, Cleopatra lived closer to the creation of the iPhone, 2007, than to the construction of the last of the 7 wonders of the world. When she first saw the pyramids, they were already an ancient monument, like the Colosseum or the Parthenon are to us today. Moreover, in her era, Alexandria was a center of advanced science and technology, home to inventions such as Heron's steam engine and sophisticated astronomical instruments. This historical paradox completely changes our perception of Cleopatra. She was not an ancient Egyptian queen, but an enlightened Hellenistic monarch who spoke 9 languages and was proficient in math, medicine, and alchemy. Her reign marked the last flowering of Egyptian statehood before being absorbed into the Roman Empire. Debunking the myth: how Mendeleev's table was actually created. The famous story about Mendeleev's dream is nothing more than a beautiful myth. For the first time, this story was launched by the scientist colleague Alexander Inostrancev. Allegedly, after 3 sleepless nights, the decision came to the chemist in a dream. However, Mendeleev himself vehemently denied this version. "I've been working on it for 25 years. Do you think it's just a snap of the fingers?" The scientist was indignant. Real history of creation. Mendeleev used cards with elements, prototype of modern flashcards. He repeatedly went through variants of arrangement, chemical solitaire. Sleep did help, but only as a way to restore his strength. Interesting fact, a similar myth exists about Newton and the apple. Scientists often become heroes of simplified legends. Zheng Shi became the prototype of pirate queen Miss Jin in the 3rd film in the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End series. Zheng Shi went down in history as the most powerful pirate of all time. Having inherited the fleet after her husband's death, she led an armada of thousands of ships and tens of thousands of sailors. By comparison, even the legendary Blackbeard, Edward Teach, commanded only a handful of ships and a couple hundred thugs. Under her iron hand, the fleet remained invincible. The authorities were never able to capture her. When she ended her days at a venerable age, Zheng Shi left behind not only fame, but also untold treasures from countless voyages. Photography as a weapon: how Stalin created his cult through images. Joseph Stalin understood the power of visual propaganda better than most. Each of his photographs was rigorously selected. T. personally approved the images that were to be included in newspapers, textbooks, or as gifts to his associates. The censors destroyed unsuccessful shots, and photographers were given strict instructions. No close-ups. The leader's face still bore traces of smallpox suffered in childhood. In the 1930s, when editing school textbooks, Stalin carefully calibrated not only the text, but also the visuals. His portraits and images of his associates had to look perfect. After all, they formed the image of an infallible leader in the new generation. Even a shadow in a photo could cause disgrace for the photographer. Thus, through the control of images, Stalin turned himself into an icon, flawless, unattainable, and omnipresent. Winston Churchill and his passion for cigars. As Prime Minister of Great Britain, Winston Churchill smoked at least a dozen Cuban cigars daily. His addiction to tobacco began while working as a war correspondent in Cuba, where he covered the anti-colonial uprising. Even in his sleep, the politician never let a cigar out of his hands, and among his favorite brands were Romeo and Juliet and La Aroma de Cuba. During his life, Churchill passed through about 300,000 cigars, which did not prevent him from living to be 90 years old. Churchill loved to work in the nude, because of which some secretaries refused to cooperate with him. One of the funniest cases occurred during the visit of Theodore Roosevelt. The American president found the Briton in his office without clothes. However, Churchill only nonchalantly remarked that Roosevelt had nothing to be embarrassed about. A real prototype of James Bond. The legendary Agent 007, who became a symbol of British intelligence, owes his appearance to a real person, Serbian spy Dusan Popov. Working for MI6 in Portugal, Popov met Ian Fleming, the future creator of the Bond saga. His charisma, love of gambling, and ability to masterfully spend public money in casinos so impressed the writer that he made him the prototype of his hero. It was Popov who inspired Fleming to create the cult novel Casino Royale, and his eccentric habits later became the image of the most famous spy in history. Unlike his literary double, Popov did not wear tuxedos with the same glamour, but surpassed Bond in the art of manipulation. He masterfully played the role of a double agent, deceiving the Nazis, and his adventurous lifestyle, luxury hotels, expensive cars, and romances with beautiful women became the basis for the image of a super spy. Ironically, the real Bond wasn't even British, but it was he who gave the world the standard of a secret agent.